Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. If it's your first time joining, welcome. If you're a previous subscriber or a new subscriber, welcome back. In today's video, I will be continuing off of the last video I posted when I was talking about making these great little in the hoop makeup bags. And I have tested the pattern a couple different ways that you can make it, and I even made a tiny little bag, and this one didn't turn out as well for me, not because of the stitch out of the design, but because my FAF machine was misbehaving. So I will be making this bag again soon, and if you would like to see this tutorial for the small bag, please comment down below. Okay. So in the previous video, I had talked about a surprise being involved with this project. What that surprise is that the designer of these bags, whoops, sorry about that, I hit my tripod. The designer of these bags has kindly given all of my subscribers a 30% off discount in her Etsy store. And her Etsy store is called SE So Crafty. And I'm going to bring that up here so you guys can see it. Give me just a second here. Here we go. Okay, this is what her site looks like. Or her store. Let me turn that brightness up just a little bit so you guys can see that better. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see that better. And you can see it's SE So Crafty. Her name is Jan Sasic. And Jan, I'd like to thank you very much for giving me this 30% discount code to share with all of my subscribers. Okay, guys. Hopefully I will have the discount code. Let me move this a little bit so we can get a little spot for it. I'll just kind of like pop it up down here at the bottom so you guys can see it. Also, it will be linked down in the description box below. It will have the link there that you can click on, and hopefully it will take you right to her Etsy store. Definitely please check out her store because she's got some great bags. The bags come with 3 different sizes. This bag size here is the 8x6 bag. It comes with a 7x4, and this little guy here is a 6x3 inch. So you could make these and even throw them in like your backpack or your, even like a little bag for your purse, because it, whoops, sorry about that, I just knocked my hoop over. This is small enough to even go in your purse. So it's like really cute. Okay, so what we're going to do first is I am going to talk about all of our supplies we're going to need. I'm going to move these out of the way. I have already hooped my cutaway stabilizer, and I'm going to be using my 13x16 magnetic mighty hoop. And that's just what's going to work for me for this large bag design. My multi-needle machine here, you see we have it set up in front of the multi-needle today. And I am in between hoop sizes. So for the mid-size bag and the large bag, I am in between hoop sizes. So I have to use my 13x16 mighty hoop. And it gives me plenty of room inside the hoop space to be able to pin the fabric down in the hoop. Okay, so besides, of course, your embroidery machine, you will have to go to her store to purchase the design. She has multiple different designs that you can choose from. And in those designs, you will get different stitch outs. So this one is called the floral, a little piece of thread on there. This is the floral design. I have also purchased the curve design, and I'm going to be going back and purchasing a couple of the other ones that she has. Each design does come with 2 different stitch outs. The floral and the curve both come, if I'm remembering correctly, they both come with the hatch design, the hatch stitch out. The only one, of course, that doesn't come with 2 is the hatch stitch out when you purchase that one. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to list all of our supplies. Of course, you are going to need all your fabrics, and I have everything prepped here. I'm going to move us a little bit this way so I can get a little closer. Okay, so you're going to need a cutaway stabilizer. We have that hooped already. I have my next piece of cutaway stabilizer prepped. I had to splice 2 pieces together to be able to fit into my large hoop. So I've done that. You're going to need a Pellin fusible, and I've got a little piece here. Where did I put it? So I can show you what that looks like. Just grab this little one here. Okay, so a Pellin fusible fleece will have a bumpy side on one side and then a soft side on the other. I'm just using a light Pellin fusible fleece. I purchased this online for a bag design I was doing a while back, and I just had it on hand, so I figured I'd go ahead and use it. So this is a thin Pellin fusible fleece. They do make ones for bag making that are thicker. So besides your cutaway, you will need some Pellin fusible fleece. Then you are going to need your fabrics. And I have everything prepped here. Okay, let me show you those. You are going to need a bottom piece and a liner piece that is 10 inches by 13 inches. And I went ahead and prepped my fabric beforehand with the fusible fleece. I went ahead and ironed that on just so we could save some time. Then you are going to need some quilt batting. I use an 80 by 20 quilt batting when I do my quilting. It's just what I prefer. Whatever kind of quilt batting that you like, go ahead and use that. I am also going to need, let me flip this over. You're going to need 2 pieces for the top of the bag that are 13 by 6 inches. And I have also put my Pellin fusible fleece on those. So I have those 2 pieces prepped here. And I'm using this beautiful yellow floral fabric, and it reminds me of vintage sheets, and it's just so pretty. I really love the color, and it's like a really kind of like it's like a cream colored background, so it's really pretty. Then of course you're going to also need your 2 pieces of batting that are also cut to 13 by 6 inches. And then you are going to need your 2 pieces of lining for the top of the bag, and those are also 13 by 6 inches. You are also going to need a zipper. If you're going to be making the smaller bag or the medium-sized bag, you will use a 12-inch zipper. For the large bag, you're going to need a 15-inch zipper. I did not have 15-inch zippers, and in the purple bag when I first stitched it out, I used an 18-inch zipper, and my multi-needle machine did not like stitching over zippers. So what I've done is I have just taken a 12-inch zipper, and I have added zipper tabs to the end of it to make it 15 inches. Okay, and make sure that you sew just past the edge of the little clasp, or the little zipper stays, I guess you could call them. So that way, okay, That way you can see them, and when you're doing your stitching, you don't run over them. So I have my I have my 12-inch zipper converted into a 15-inch zipper. Then before you do any stitching, you're going to want to prepare your bag tags. And let me show you what those are. That's this portion of the bag right here. Okay. I like my tags, my tabs to actually be a little bit longer. And that's just because if I'm somewhere and I want to hang the bags, you can even make them longer. And that way you can hang it. I've been to hotels before where the sink leaked, and I had my makeup bag sitting on the counter, and a bunch of my makeup got ruined because the sink leaked all over the counter while we were out for the day. So what I do is I hang my bags on like a hanger and hang it on the towel bar in the bathroom so nothing gets ruined. So you are going to make sure that you prep your tabs, and what you're going to do is you're going to, according to her instructions, you're going to cut pieces of fabric that are 2 inches by 4 inches. You're going to fold it in half. Then you're going to open it back up and fold it in half again and press to the inside. And then you're going to fold it in half and press so you have a nice crease line. Like I said, I like the longer tabs. You can make them to whatever length you want. In hers, they finish to be about 1 inch, which is pretty common. But I really like the longer ones. So you can make them as long as you want. She does specify in her instructions that you can do them. You can make them longer. If you want a longer tab, then make it wider and longer. So there you go. I got those ready. Okay. So also what you're going to need is you're going to need some pins. I have a little pin cushion here. You're going to need some tape. I absolutely hate this masking tape, but I'm trying to get it used up before I buy any other. You can use the blue painter's tape as well. I just don't buy it. I have some, but I don't use it. Then you are going to need a couple different types of scissors. I have my applique scissors that I use for in the hoop, and you can see they're curved there. Just makes for trimming threads in the hoop a little bit easier. Then I have some small embroidery scissors, and you will need this for trimming the batting, the stabilizer away from the zipper. And then you're going to need some shears or a rotary cutter for when you trim the excess fabric away when we're finishing the bag. Okay, let's go ahead and put that stuff aside. We don't need that yet. What we're going to do is when you get your design, when you purchase your design, of course you're going to download, put it on your USB for your machine, or if you're able to do Wi-Fi to your machine, however you do it, send your designs to your machine. And in her instructions, I like printing out my instructions. I just like having a hard copy better. What you're going to do is your first step, if you are going to want to quilt the bottom of your bag, like I have done on all of mine, I just like it. I think it makes a beautiful finish. And this is what the floral looks like again. We are going to go ahead and do that step first. Okay, so what we're going to do is I am going to get the hoop into my machine, and let me see here. I'm going to move over just a bit. We're going to go at an angle so I am not constantly hitting the machine here, and the tripod here. Hopefully. We are going to attach the hoop into the machine. And one thing I'm going to do while filming is that while we are doing the actual big stitch out parts, I'm going to pause the video because it will make for a very long video. So I want to be able to keep this video under an hour if possible. I know an hour is a really long video. So, okay. So what we're going to do, I have it all set in over here into my machine. And what the first step is going to be to stitch the bottom of the bag is you are going to make sure you attach your Pellin fusible fleece if you're going to be using the fleece. In her pattern, it does show, I'm sorry, in her design pattern, whichever you want to call it, it does show that you can do the bag in 3 different ways. You can just use the Pellin fusible fleece and construct it that way. Or you can use the Pellin fusible fleece and the batting, which I'll be doing today. Or you can just use your batting. So there's 3 different ways that you can do it. Fleece only, fleece and batting, or just batting. Okay? Alrighty. So what our first step is going to be is you're going to have your fabric prepped. Then you're going to stitch out the first stitch, and this is going to be the outline for where you are going to place your fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start, and we're going to go ahead and do that. And I am using a bright yellow, and it might be a little bit hard to see until we get some stitching done, maybe on the green fabric. I'm not sure if you guys can see the stitch out, the stitch, it's really faint. Okay, and one thing you want to do if you are using a multi-needle machine, if you do not have your machine set already as a, for when it does like the multi-direction or the multi-stitch outs, I believe some machine calls it manual stitch out. I have my machine set to where it goes to the next color automatically. And that works for me when I'm doing my quilting and things like that. Also, if I'm doing designs that have a lot of color changes, I have it set to go to the next color automatically. You can set in your machine where you do each color yourself, but I just don't do that. So I'm going to make sure that I pay attention to each step, because I'm going to have to stop the stitching after each step. Okay, so we have went ahead and stitched our placement line. I am going to move that there. I am going to remove the hoop. And hopefully you guys, can you guys see that? I don't know if you guys can see that line. And it's just right across the top here. And I know the yellow is really hard to see on the white. Okay, so what we're going to do is you are going to take your fabric piece that you have prepped with your Pellin. Your first, if you are going to use your batting, you're going to take your batting and you're going to put that down first. And one thing that I learned to do to make sure that you are getting it, let me move this ahead just a little bit. Hopefully you guys can see this. So our stitch line on this side's here and the other one's here. I know it's hard to see, I'm sorry. I have folded it in half to make sure that I get it over, that I've got my stitch lines covered. And then I fold it back down and make sure that I have enough at the top as well and at the bottom. And then I take my prepared piece of fabric with the Pellin and I'm going to lay that right on top. Now what I found when I stitched the bag for the first time is that tape did not do very well on my multi-needle here. So what I'm going to be doing is, ouch, I just poked myself. I'm going to be pinning it down right at the very edges. So give me just a moment. I will pin it down and I will be right back. Okay, so you can see here that I have it all pinned into the hoop on each side. And that way I know that the fabric is just going to stay in place. And like I was saying, I just don't like using tape on my large machine. And especially, there some of the areas we will be using tape, but most of the time I will be using pins. It just works better for me. But if you like using tape, do whichever way you prefer. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back into the machine. Make sure that your hoop clicks into your machine. Now we are going to go ahead and start the stitch out. I'm going to start it, let you see it start going. Then I'm going to pause the video because this does take approximately, I have my stitch speed at 850 stitches per minute. It may take a little bit longer than 10 minutes, but if I keep that 10 minutes in there, it's going to make for a very long video in all of our stitch outs. So I'm going to go ahead and start it, and then I will stop the camera and then pick back up when it is finished stitching. This first part is now doing the floral stitch out. Let you guys see it starting there. I'm going to go ahead and pause video and then we will pick right back up when it is complete. Okay, we are just about to the end. Okay, here we go. We've got that portion finished. It tells me embroidery completed. I'm going to go ahead and take it off the machine. And that is the bottom of our bag all stitched out. Now what your next step is going to be is you're going to be removing it from the hoop and you're going to trim 1 inch all the way around the design. And that 1 inch is going to give you the fabric you need to assemble the bag. In her cutting requirements for the fabric, I didn't have to trim anything down. I just left it what it was and it worked out perfect. I'm going to go ahead and pause the camera, remove the bottom of the bag from the hoop my next piece of stabilizer, and then we will move on to constructing the top portion of the bag. We will be right back. Okay, so I have our next piece of stabilizer hooped. I have the, let me make sure that we have the design set. Okay, and then I just need to, let me go back and do my colors. Make sure all my colors are correct. And we're just doing all the same color. So you need to really pay attention to your steps as you're working through them to make sure that you are placing your fabrics in the right spot. In her designs, let me show you here. In her instructions, when you get them, you can print out a color card, and it has everything that here of the colors that you're going to need, and it also will print out a chart of where the color line is going to be. I print everything in black and white, but I just wanted to go ahead and print it. So I had the information here on what my trims were and things like that. There are actually 17 different colors with 23 different color changes, but I use all the same color. So you just have to make sure that when you're doing your stitch out, you follow your instructions as best as possible. Okay, we are going to go ahead and start with the construction of the top of the bag. So our first step is going to be hoop your stabilizer. place it in the hoop or in the machine. And we are going to do our first placement stitch, which is going to be step 1. And that is to sew the placement stitch for the zipper. So let's go ahead and start. I'm going to just go ahead and let it continue filming on this because it's very quick. Hopefully, I'm not sure if you guys can see the stitch line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take it out. And hopefully you guys can see. Can you guys see that okay? I mean, it's right along here. And what worked out perfect is my splicing of the stabilizers together worked out perfect to be in the middle, and I made sure I did that when I hooped my stabilizer. That way when I do trim away the stabilizer, I'll be trimming away that excess bulk. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to place our zipper. If you have your 15-inch zipper, great. I did not have 15-inch zippers, so I made my zipper with the zipper tabs. You are going to make sure you place your zipper with the zipper tab facing to you. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I get this in there really well. And what I did is I did tape the zipper to the hoop, and you can see here that I have my tab up here, and I just went ahead and make sure your zipper is in there well. And I know that it is going to stitch on the fabric and not the zipper part itself, because like I mentioned, my multi-needle machine does not like stitching over zippers. Hopefully I got my placement correct. I did it just like I did my second bag that I did the practice stitch out on, and it worked just perfectly. So I went ahead and did it the same way. And all I'm doing is I'm making sure that this zipper is nice and secure. And you can see that I have it taped in there. We're going to go ahead and put her back into the machine. And I'm going to hit start. And this is going to now just stitch down the side of the zipper. And this is just the placement stitch for the zip. Not the placement stitch. I'm sorry. It is the tack down stitch for the zipper. So that will actually be step 2. Step 3. I'm sorry. So in the instructions, this is step 3. Okay. Okay, so I'm making sure I stop so it doesn't start the next stitching. Now what we're going to do is we are going to get either, let's see, I'm trying to find my small scissors here. And I like using the small scissors. And what we're going to do now is we are going to take it again off the machine. What I liked to do while doing my practice stitch out, I opened the zipper and I took my seam ripper and I stuck it through there and I made a cut. Can you guys see that? I'm making a cut, and that way I have a opening to trim. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. I'm going to trim because I like getting in there nice and close and I get my big head in the way. So I'm gonna stop the video. I'm gonna trim away the stabilizer from the zipper, and we'll be right back. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the stabilizer trimmed away from the back side of the zipper. I am going to go ahead and close the zipper back up. And we are going to now move on to step 5. It's telling us to put the hoop back on the machine and stitch out our next color. And this stitch out will be the placement lines for the top and the bottom of the first side of the bag. Okay, so let's go ahead and pop it back into the machine. And this stitch out is really quickly, so I am not going to pause the video. So let's just go ahead and okay, and then it's going to do the bottom stitch line for the placement line at the bottom edge of the bag. So now I'm going to make sure that it stops. And now we're going to remove the hoop again. And now what we're going to do is we are going to take the front piece of our fabric, and I already have that prepped with the Pellin. If you are going to use your quilt batting, you will take your piece of quilt batting as well, and you are going to, got a couple pieces of lint on here. You're going to make sure you line up your batting with the top edge of your fabric. And what we're going to do is how our placement lines stitched out on this side, we're going to place our fabric top down on this side. And what we want to do is we want to line our fabric. Remember that first placement line where the zipper was? What I did is what worked really well for me, so I knew that the stitch was going to be catching the edge of the fabric, because it is really close right to the edge. I put it just beyond my zipper. So if you're confident enough in your stitching, I missed it pretty close on the first trial I did. So I just wanted to make sure that, I got it within an eighth of an inch of the edge of that line, and it really worried me. So I just want to make sure that I am getting the batting lined up correctly with that edge of that fabric. And then I am going to lay it down. Let's tilt us down just a bit. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. So I'm going to be lining that fabric up right with the edge of that zipper. And I know I'm using a really pale colored zipper. I'm using an off-white zipper to kind of go along with the off-white of the fabric. So I'm making sure, let's go ahead and make sure that's on there quite well. Okay. Okay, and then let's go ahead and now you can either pin it down or you can tape it down, whichever you prefer. I liked pinning it down just because I knew it was going to stay in place. And again, I just like using the pins better. A good tip though that I can give you is make sure that when you are pinning, you put your hand behind the back of the hoop to support the pin, so you are not putting a lot of pressure on your stabilizer and stretching it. Okay, so we're going to put it back into the machine. And now we are going to do the tack down stitch of our first piece of fabric. And that is going to be step 6, and it's going to be your tack down the fabric, and we're going then to flip that over. So let's go ahead and tack it down. And this is really where some of the magic is really starting to happen. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now what we're going to do is remove it from the hoop again. Remove your pins. And we are now moving on to step 7. Step 7 is where you're going to be folding our fabric over. And you're going to finger press this lightly. In her instructions, she says she likes to get it closer to the teeth. So you can kind of adjust it so where it will go a little bit closer to those teeth and then finger press it down. What I like is I just like it a little bit wider. It's just preference, whatever you'd like to do. But don't pull your fabric. Like from here, don't pull it, because then you're not going to be able to catch this edge of the fabric. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are catching that fabric, because it's going to create a really pretty finished stitch right here along the edge where the zipper is. So I'm going to go ahead and pin down again just so I know that it is going to stay in place. Okay, so I got my little pin right there. We're going to stick back in the machine, and we are going to do our step 8. No, we are still on step 7. Okay, so it's going to move to the top, and you're going to see that it's going to do this beautiful finished stitch right along here. Okay. And that is it for that stitch. We are now going to move on to step 8. What step 8 will be doing is we are now going to sew the quilting or the stipple design, depending on whatever design that you bought. Since I did the floral, we are going to now stitch out the floral portion. And it is going to be the same design as what the bottom of the bag is, this floral stitch out. Okay, let's go ahead and start. Now I'm going to pause the video. You guys can see it starting to stitch out. I'm going to pause the video, let it do its stitch out, and I will be back when it is completed. Okay, we are right about to the end of our first portion, or the first top portion of the bag. This last little bit right here. My machine is making a little bit of a squeal, and I think what it is the arm where it moves back and forth just needs to be greased a little bit. So if you guys hear that kind of like bird chirp sound, that's what that is. Okay. Almost had a problem there. Okay, so this is what, let's go ahead and trim that. Okay, so this is our first portion, and you can see that there on how really pretty that's stitched out. You can kind of see, hopefully you guys can see that okay. And I'm using this soft yellow, so it just kind of did a really pretty quilt design, and the stitches are kind of disappearing into the fabric. I wanted the texture of the quilting, but I didn't want it to be as obvious as what I did on the purple bag, where I used the fabric that had the white background and the purple florals. I used a dark purple thread. And this one, I wanted it to blend in a little bit more, so I'm using the light yellow thread. Okay, so now what our next step is if you are going to be doing a applique label, if you're choosing to do that, you would move on to step 9. You would follow steps 9, 10, 11, and 12 if you are going to be doing your applique label. I'm not going to be doing the applique label, and the reason for that is because I want to be able to use my bag for whatever I want. I don't want to have a label on it. But in the instructions, it does give you, or in the design, in the design instructions, it gives you stitch outs for a tag for travel, first aid kit, makeup, and a blank label. So you can put a name on there or whatever you want to put on that label. Okay? So if you're going to do that, follow steps 9, 10, 11, and 12. If not, we are going to move on to number 13. And number 13 is we remove the hoop from the machine and we are going to flip it over. Okay, so pay attention to how I'm flipping it over. So this is where our stitched out portion is. We are going to flip it over so the stitch, when it's on the back side, our stitch out's going to be on the right side. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your first piece of lining. You can see our lining here. And I am going to place it on the left side. So where our stitch out is on the right, I'm placing the lining on the left side. And what I want to do is I want to line it up to that stitch out line. And you're going to have enough fabric to have excess for construction of the bag. So what I did is I made sure I messed up on this one. So I really want to specify to you guys, make sure you place it far enough over to make sure that you're going to catch that stitch, okay? So what I did is, there's that, can you see that faint line right here? That is what I'm going to put, that make sure that I am putting it on. And even just a little bit beyond that, and you can make sure that you have it placed. If you fold it in half, okay, and then fold it back down, and just make sure you have it just a little bit beyond that line. Now this is where you're going to tape. I didn't like this part. This part really kind of tripped me out because I messed up on it the first time because I didn't place my fabric over far enough. So I am making sure that I place it far enough over to where it's going to stitch, and I made sure that I am really putting a good piece, a length of tape down. So I make sure that I'm really getting that on there. This tape does not stick the best, so I'm going to flip it over here so I can get the other side and make sure I get a long enough piece of tape. And you want to make sure that when you're taping this down, that you're not going to have a gap, that when you put it back on the hoop, it's going to kind of like hang down. So you want to make sure that your fabric is taut enough on there. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to make sure I tape that. And then what I do is I'm going to flip it back over, where you're going to put it back in the hoop. But before I put it back in the hoop, what I do is I make sure I rub my hand on there. So I make sure that tape is going to be attached really well, because my tape is crappy tape and it kind of like will fold up at the edges. And if it does, while you're doing the stitching, see, like right there, while you're doing that stitching, the tape can stick to your table. I almost put the hoop incorrectly. I almost put the hoop in incorrectly. There we go. Okay. So we're going to put it back in. Click in place. And now we are going to stitch the placement line that will be holding down the top of our liner. Okay. And that is step 14. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to take it out of the hoop again, or out of the machine again, remove our tape. And you can see that I did pretty well on that one, even though I did kind of put it a little crooked. It did catch the fabric. Okay, so you just want to make sure that you're putting enough fabric here so that it catches the stitch, or that the stitch catches the fabric. Let's yank this tape off. And now what we're going to do is we are, throw that tape away, I'm going to trim. See, this fabric I got is not the greatest. I purchased it from Walmart and it just shreds like crazy. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we are going to flip it back over, finger press, and make sure that when you're on the back side that you're not pushing really hard, because you can stretch out your stabilizer. If you are new to machine embroidery, I cannot stress that enough to you guys. So what I'm going to do, instead of taping this time, I'm going to flip over and I'm going to make sure that I am pinning through all the top, and I'm making sure I'm catching that back fabric. Okay. And same with this side as well, because you really want to make sure that you are catching the corners, because you do not want your corners to fold over when you put it back into the hoop, or the hoop into the machine, because it will stitch. Okay, so I have it here and here. I have it pinned, and you can see that it is pinned on the back right here and there at the bottom. And again, guys, you don't have to pin it. It's just what worked for me, okay? What may work for me may not work for you. So do what works for you. Okay, so now the next part is step 15, where we took it off of the machine, we finger pressed we folded the lining fabric over, we finger pressed, and now we are going to proceed on to step 16, where it is going to sew the next color, and this will sew down the liner fabric. Okay, so step 16. So it's going to sew along the bottom as well. Okay, so that is for that step. Now what we are going to do is we are going to proceed to constructing our other side of the bag. So basically we're just going to be following the exact same instructions, but just flipping it a little bit. So what we're going to do is we are going to now take our next top piece. So we have our next top piece, and I have my pellin on the back. Then I am going to take also my batting. I'm going to make sure I line that up. And you can see how I have it here in the frame. I have my stitched out portion on the left, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the next piece, I'm going to lay it face down, and I'm going to put it right on top of the existing part. Okay. And I also want to make sure that I'm putting it far enough past that zipper portion So I'm going to fold back just a little bit to make sure that I have enough there. And I am good. I am going to pin this down. And again, I just like my pins, guys. I really do. It just, pins just ensure that, if to me, that it's going to stay. I've never had the problem of, if you pay attention to where you're putting your pins, I've never had the problem of stitching over one on my multi-needle machine, because I make sure that I always put it outside the stitch area. I have seen people on other Facebook videos, I'm sorry, not Facebook, yeah, Facebook videos, on some of the quilt embroidery groups I belong to on Facebook, that they put the pin in the stitch area and they stitched over it, and they that they've screwed up the needle bars on their machine, and they ask, well, what caused this? And you can see that the pin was in the area. So just, if you're new with machine embroidery, make sure that you always put your pins outside of stitch area. One thing I like to do in my tutorials is I like including hints that I have experienced along the way, so maybe you guys can learn from those as well. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to sew step 17, and step 17 I actually skipped. Let me go back. Step 17 was our placement lines. Silly me. So let's take this back off. I got overconfident because I have made 4 other bags. So I figured, okay, I knew what I was going to be doing, but I got a little bit overconfident. So step 17 was actually going to now stitch out the placement line for the next side of the bag. Okay. And if I would have mistakenly stitched that, it would have messed up our second portion here, because I would not have been able to fold it over correctly. Okay, so there's our stitch placement line. So now what we're going to do is we are going to move to step 18, and we are going to place the fabric. So I was just one little, come on, come out of there. I was just one little step ahead. She didn't want to come out of the hoop, or out of the machine. And now we're going to put our fabric back down. Make sure we're good. Okay, so now I'm going to make sure that I have that zipper just a little bit beyond the zipper. Make sure that I'm good. I'm good. And again, pin back down. Sorry about that, guys. I got a little bit ahead of myself, which is very easy to do when you are doing a project. You want to make sure that you follow the steps, because I would have made a mistake there that would have made me end up picking the stitches out, because you see where the placement stitch was here at the top, and it did it at the bottom. Hopefully you guys can see that placement stitch right there. Can you guys see that? That would have stitched down the bag, and I wouldn't have been able to flip it over properly. Okay, so now I've got that fabric back on. Now we are going to hit start, and now we are going to do our tack down stitch of the top layer. Okay, so now again, hoop out, pins removed, And now we are going to again flip it over. Finger press it gently down. And again, I am going to pin. And you guys can see how I was talking about that I like leaving my zipper open a little bit more. She said in her designs, that in her stitch outs, that she likes putting it to where it's closer. And you can do that, but be very careful when you do that. Make sure you get it finger pressed really nicely. You can even take your iron and press that down so it'll lay nice and flat. But be really careful if you're pressing too close to that zipper, because you don't want to melt your zipper. I have done that in a bag project before and I was so upset. Okay, get that back up there. Okay, so I have it pinned down. I'm going to go right back to the machine. Pop it in and stitch out. And again, this is going to sew the zipper part down. Then it is also going to sew down this part. And then it is going to start the quilting design. So I'll let that go ahead and start. Then while that is stitching out, I will pause video and bring it back. Okay, so it's going to continue on, and now it's going to start the quilting of the next side. I'm going to go ahead and pause video, and we'll be right back. Okay, once again, we are right about to the end of this part. Just a little bit more stitches here. Okay, so we are done with that part. We are going to make sure we stop. I am going to remove from the machine again. And this is what your top portion should now look like after step 20, I believe that was. Let me double check. It was step 20. So once you reach step 20, this is how your bag should look. I really love how this is turning out. I'm really excited. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are again going to flip over, and we are going to do our last piece of the backing. Oh, look guys, there you go. See, I was talking about how easy it is to get the fabric in there. This isn't a big deal. I can just kind of clip that. And I'm going to go ahead and do that and show you without having to pick that stitching out. That little piece of fabric isn't going to be a big deal. See, I just clipped that down. So that's why you want to make sure that you always do your little corners and stuff. Like I pinned them up here. I didn't have the issue before, but when I put it back into the machine, it did that, it folded that little portion over. That's one of the things that you want to really make sure that you use caution with so it doesn't happen. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, again, the stitching is on this side. So we're going to flip over so the stitching is on your left side. And you're going to take your last piece of lining and you're going to put it over the existing piece of lining. If you are using a patterned fabric that has an obvious front and back, you are going to, let's see, you're going to want to make sure that you're putting the lining face down if you're using a fabric that has an obvious front and back. Okay, so we are going to tape this again, and I'm not going to mention again how much I hate it. I'm making sure I use a long enough piece so I can get all the way. Can you guys see that? I'm making sure I use a long enough piece. Push that down. My frame part is right here, so I'm making sure that I just make sure that's attached really well. What do you guys think about this filming angle of filming on the large machine, the large multi-needle? My machine has the option of this table. It's a fold-up table that I can just loosen a screw and fold it back down so I don't have to have it up all the time. But I really like the idea of using it while filming, so I have a workspace where you guys can see really well. What do you guys think? For those of you that have seen my other videos where I just film from like the bird's eye view or the above view. Okay, so I'm making sure my tape is attached really well. We are going to flip back over and put again back into the machine. That is one of the things about doing an in the hoop design, is you are doing a lot of steps. You are taking in and out of the hoop or in and out of the machine a lot, not out of the hoop. But one of the great things about in the hoop designs is you are getting a really nice quality finish that looks professional. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and hit our next step. That next step is step 22, and it's going to do the tack down stitch again for the last piece of the lining, other than the bottom lining. Okay, and we are going to stop. We are going to again remove. We're going to flip back over, peel off our tape. Come off. It's really funny because I complained about the tape not sticking, and the tape is actually really sticking. It must have been, I'm getting further down into the roll where it hasn't been exposed as much. Okay, so our next step is that we are going to fold our lining back down and get that piece of lint off there. I'm going to flip back over. And again, I'm going to make sure that I am pinning it. So let's make sure we got that good. Ouch. I am going to also, on this next step, because how I showed you that I clipped that little piece of fabric, I am going to make sure that I tape those down now. I just don't want that to happen again. Not that it would, but obviously there's that possibility. Okay, so I'm going to flip back over, and I'm going to just make sure that I tape these parts down right here, just so that they don't pop back up. Okay. Or fold back in, like that one did here. Okay. So we are now going to flip it back over, make sure our hoop is in the right direction, put it back in. And our next step is going to be step 23. And now it is going to sew down the sides and the top, as in step 14 and 15, where it anchored the lining piece. And this is going to be really quick, so I'm not going to pause. Okay, so now it's going to sew down the bottom. stop. Okay, so now we have a fun part. I'm not going to be afraid to tell you guys that this part really made me nervous when I made the bag, the purple bag, for the very first time, because I didn't want to really mess this up. And my hoop doesn't want to come out. There we go. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to attach our tabs. Okay, so what you want to do is I'm going to show you a little trick I did. I have this little 2.5-inch quilting ruler, and what I did is I'm opening my zipper. It tells you in the instructions, very important, open your zipper at least a 1/2 inch at this time. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I open it just a little bit more than a 1/2 inch, and what I did is I taped that tab down in place so it's not moving around. And I just did like this, taped it down so that tab is staying in place. Can you guys see that okay? Right there. Okay, so now what you're going to do is with my little 2.5-inch ruler, I took the 1-inch side and I placed it on that stitch outline, where the stitch outline is. So I'm going to do this side first, and I placed it right on that stitch outline. And I want to make sure that my tabs are going to be the same length. So I'm thinking I'm going to go 2-inch tabs, and I am putting the ruler on that stitch line, and where my 2-inch mark is, well, I kind of got that backwards. Where my 2-inch mark is where I am putting the folded edge of my tab. Can you guys see that okay? So now what I'm going to do is I make sure that that is in place. But actually, I'm again skipping a step. You're going to sew your next color, which is going to be your placement lines for the tabs. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and pop that back in there. I got a little excited again and moved too quickly. So we're going to do the placement line. Okay. Stop. Okay. The reason why I stopped is because what it did is it was going to do the actual you place the tab with the fold the side in, and it was going to attach the tab. I don't know if it just kind of when she did her design. So just make sure that what I did after that is I placed both tabs. If you know where your tab is going to be, go ahead and place your tabs. Let it stitch your placement line over the tabs, and then do the next stitch, which is going to firmly stitch them down. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so there's that one. I've got that in place, and I am going to again tape down, and that is just going to hold that tab in the proper place for when it stitches. Okay, so again, I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to make sure my tab is straight. And I'm also making sure that I'm centering the tab on that zipper. So I have a little bit less than 1/4 inch on each edge. Okay. Let me go ahead and tape that one down. Make sure it's straight, and go ahead, push that down. And now I'm going to go ahead and stitch. I'm going to go ahead, well, hopefully Jan sees this and she'll see that it just did the placement stitch for this one first, and it was going to go right in to sewing the tab without putting the tab there. I don't know if I did it correctly or if maybe she needs to correct that in her design. I will mention that to her as well. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and stitch. And that's going to stitch the tab down. Okay, and it came all the way down to the other one, and it didn't do a placement stitch. It just did the tack down stitch for it. Okay. Oh, yes it did. It did it as well. Okay, so you're going to do it. I was incorrect. I was incorrect. Sorry about that, guys. You're going to, in step 24, you're going to do your placement stitch first. Then you're going to put your first tab down, and then it's going to sew the tab on. Then you're going to stop it, and you're going to bring it back down to the other side. It's going to do the next placement stitch. Then you're going to stop it immediately after that placement stitch, and you're going to add your new tab. Okay, so I missed that in my first time around. That is not her fault whatsoever. In her instructions, that's on me. Okay, so now our next step, we just finished number 25. Now our next step is going to be fun. You're going to now take your bottom, and it says in her instructions that she's going to take the bottom of the fabric that's already been stitched with your pellin and your stabilizer and your batting. Okay, and what I did is I just trimmed my stabilizer away along the stitch outline, so I didn't have that excess of the thickness of the stabilizer. Now what you're going to do is you're going to place the bottom fabric face down over the top of the fabric in the hoop. Okay, what I did, let me show you what I did. I really made sure that I got everything lined up. What are we doing? Okay, see there I have a piece of tape coming off the back. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. It was stuck to the table. So now what you're going to do is when it's face down, okay, you're going to put it face down, and you want it to line up with your existing stitch on each side. So fold it and make sure it lines up quite well, and then make sure you're straight. Also make sure that the stitching here is going to line up with this stitching as well. So I folded it in half so I knew where my placement was. And I am going to take some pins. I'm not pinning it down yet. What I'm doing is I'm just putting a pin so where I can hold it on that line. Okay. I want to make sure that my stitch lines are lining up. Okay. So I'm just sliding a pin in there so they line up. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure I have it too far this way. So I'm going to just kind of pull this back just a little bit. I'm going to fold this part back, and I'm going to see that this stitch line is going to match up where the stitches are here. Okay, I have a little piece of thread there. Get out of there. Okay, so that looks really good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put pins in this end outside the stitch area. So that side looks good. And again, I'm checking that side looks good. And get it pinned in there. And now I'm going to turn it around and make sure I do the same thing on the other end. This is just a little bit of a extra tip for you guys to make sure that it lines up nicely. You want that to be really pretty when it lines up, and that your bag will be nice and straight, and that you get your stitching nice and straight. And it is a little bit, it does take a little bit of practice. I'm not kidding you, because you can see that when you line up, and then when I boxed my corners as well, when we get to the box corners, I'll show you that, but it lines up pretty well. So it's not doesn't look bad at all. I really like how it looks. That's why either I match the thread to the bottom or I match the thread to the top. In this case, I wanted the stitching to show on the bottom, so that is why I used a darker. Okay, so we're going to pin this as well. I am not sure how long of the video we are. I may go over an hour. I'm not sure. Okay. Okay, so I have that all pinned in place, and you don't want this to move while you're stitching. So I'm going to go ahead and pop back into the hoop or to the machine. And she does say that she uses a Pellin foam, and she likes it because it gives a really nice stiff bottom of the bag. So that's always an option as well. That was why I was telling you at the beginning to make sure you read all your instructions first, because if you want to use that Pellin foam, you're going to need that when you stitch out your bottom, if you're going to do the stitched out bottom. Okay? So now we are going to sew the next color, which is going to stitch down the fabric on all 4 sides. So we're now on step 26. So let's go ahead and start. Okay, so there's the first side. There's our next one. And the last side. Okay, guys. So now we are going to stop it. We're going to take it out of the hoop, or out of the machine again. And this is where I'm going to remove all my existing pins, okay? Because we don't need them anymore. You can leave, if you want to, you can leave the pins that are holding the top portion down where this excess part is here. You can leave those there. It's not going to hurt nothing. But now what we're going to do is we are going to flip the hoop back over, and you can see again, see where it kind of puckered a little bit, and I just caught that edge as well. It's not that bad, and I can just clip it. That is where that piece of tape came loose, and again there we go. Okay, so that was where I had it taped, and the tape stuck to the bed of the table, and that's okay. I just clipped that edge. I don't clip any of the stitching. I just clip that fabric off. Okay, guys, we are almost done. We are now turned over, and you are now going to take your final piece of liner, and we are going to tape it to the back. So here's our final piece, and again, fold it in half so you know you are getting your stitch lines covered. So I have plenty on this side. I have plenty on that side. I have plenty there. Do I have plenty there? Let's make sure. I can move it over just a little bit more. There we go. That looks good. We're going to flip back down, and I'm going to tape all the way around it. I found that's what worked best for me. That way none of the fabric is going to come up. It's not going to fold and go into the stitching. She just did a tab here, 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 and here, and that's fine if that works for you. I know on my machine, since I'm using the flatbed table, that it does kind of catch the tape. So I'm making sure that I tape both ends, and I'm making sure that the fabric isn't loose so I don't get no weird creases or puckers. Okay, so now I got both ends taped, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape all the way down so it is taped to my frame, or my hoop, and it's going to attach both ends of the tape here so they won't lift back up. It might be a little bit of overkill, but I know that's what worked for me. Okay, just like so. Alrighty. And, you know, I know it's a bit of overkill, but I just know from the experience of the purple bag that the tape stuck to the flatbed table, and I just want to make sure that it's not going to come up and stick to the table. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, we are going to put back into the machine, and we are going to do our last part of the stitching that will involve the embroidery machine. We are almost finished. Okay, so now we are on step 27, and it's going to sew the next color, which is going to stitch down all 4 sides of the back lining. And this is doing kind of almost like a bean stitch, where it's almost doing a really nice finish stitch. And then after this last portion, there's going to be one more part. You will notice that this portion of this stitching is stitching about 1/10 of an inch in of the previous stitch line. And she has that in her instructions here. Okay, so when this finishes sewing this down, I am going to pause the machine for just a moment after this next little line here. Okay, so you will notice that what it did is I stopped the machine here. What it did is it just did a line from here to here. And what it did is it moved back up to here, and it's going to sew another line up here, and you're going to have an opening here. What that opening is going to be for is to turn the bag inside or right side out. Okay. Okay, so now the final stitch out for the embroidery machine is it is going to do a basting stitch on each corner to where we are going to cut out the corners for our boxed corners of the bag. So really quick, just a simple thick or not thick, sorry, just a wide basting stitch. Okay, so my machine's going to tell me embroidery finished. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are completely finished with the portion that will be portion that is stitched out on the embroidery machine. We are almost completely finished with the bag. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove the hoop from the machine. I'm going to remove the bag from the hoop, and I'm going to adjust the camera to our overhead view so we can move to the sewing machine for the final steps of constructing the bag. I will be right back. Okay, so we have the bag now all out of the hoop. I've made sure I've removed all of my pins. And now what we're going to do is you can either trim up your bag with a rotary cutter or if you have some scissors. I just used my big shears because they cut really well and it was just easier for me to do. So what you're going to do is you want to make sure that on the side, on the back, where you have your opening, I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to cut this side yet. We're going to cut all the 3 other sides out and then we will cut that side. And I will show you why in just a moment. So she says to cut a 1/4 inch away from your stitch line. And you can see how I am cutting through all of these layers. Come on. So I cut through the fabric, the pellin, the batting, the stabilizer, the other layer of batting and another layer of the fabric, and the 2 pieces of lining, and it cut really well with my scissors. So I'm going to just, I'm going to save some of my strips because I can use those in some scrap projects in the future. And I can do like strip quilt or strip quilt block, anything like that. And I also save my pieces of batting. And the reason why I do that is I make lanyards, and it's really nice to have pieces of batting that you don't have to cut off from another large roll of batting. This piece may be just too small, so I'm going to just go ahead and toss that one. So we're going to stick that aside. I'm going to continue cutting all my pieces. And I'm going to just kind of hold it this way. And it's easier for me to see the color on the back side because my light stitching on the green fabric. Now this is where I'm cutting through all those other layers, and I'll show you here in just a second. So all those layers where we had the zipper and all those other pieces is what I just cut through there. That piece where the tab was, my zipper tabs, all of that. I'm going to just throw that one away because that one was kind of messy. So, oops, trim that a little better there. There we go. Okay, so just this side now, and I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. And I'm not, again, I'm not cutting this yet. And we want to save that to last, and I will show you here in just a minute why. Ooh, that one got a little close. Are we all right? Yeah, we're all right. You gotta use a little muscle right there. There. Okay. These pieces I'm not too worried about, so I'm going to go ahead and toss them. Okay. And I always try to like to clean up as I go along. Okay, so this part I am saving for last. And the reason why is in her instructions, she says that while you're trimming, the two pieces here that are our final liner pieces, we want to, I'm going to move those aside, and then I'm going to do my trim. And she actually says, I cut all the fabric except the two lining pieces to 1/4 inch. So I'm folding these back, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut everything to about the 1/4 inch that she says, except for the two back lining pieces. Okay, and so that's a nice piece. We're going to go ahead and save that one. And the stabilizer, you can always splice stabilizer together or use them for key fobs because they're smaller pieces. To save your stabilizer. You can also take water-soluble stabilizer and splice it together with a, you know the little glue sticks? Game changer, I'm telling you. Okay, so I'm going to save this to last. Now what we're going to do is we are going to trim our pieces where the what'd she call it? The, oh my gosh, guys. I forgot what it's called. The basting stitch. How could I forget what a basting stitch is called? So I'm going to cut on the basting stitch or just right next to it. Don't cut your knots right here on the stitching. So just make sure you cut just along right next to that. And make sure you don't cut past the basting stitch. I stop just right before, and I will show you how I cut that. Okay, so see how there's just that little bit there? I just take my little scissors and cut it off by layer. That way I am not cutting into that corner. I don't want to cut past that corner because if I cut in too deep, I'm going to affect the bag. Okay, so make sure you don't cut past that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and cut all 4 corners. And there we go. So those are gone. Okay. We'll go ahead and cut this part now. That way I can finish the other part off camera just to save a little bit of time. She says that she trims her lining pieces down to 1/2 inch. I'm a little bit beyond 1/2 inch, so I'm just going to cut just a little bit. And I know I shouldn't be cutting the way I'm cutting with my arm in front of me like that. Okay, so this is trimmed to about 1/2 inch. Okay. She actually You can see in her instructions here that I have printed out that she actually kind of just does where the 1/2 inch where it's going to be. So I'm just going to cut what I like to do from previous bag making. I saw this somebody do this. I just cut like so. I do like a little, can you see my little dog ear here? I'll show you in just a second what I mean. And then I'm going to cut the rest of this off to the 1/4 inch that she talked about. Come on. Okay, so do you see how I did my little trim right here? That just gives me a little bit of extra room to work with when I'm sealing the bag up beyond there. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to finish trimming these, and then we will move to our next step. Be right back. Okay, so I have the rest of my corners turned out, or cut out. Now what we're going to do is we are going to, step 30, we are now going to turn the bag out and seal the hole. Okay, so when you turn your bag out, you want to be very careful that you do not rip these stitches here, okay? They are reinforced, but that doesn't mean that they won't tear. So you want to be really gentle with it. What I did is I kind of pushed the sides in. I got my fingers in here and I kind of pushed the sides in, and it was a little bit, I'm kind of like popping them in there. Does that make sense? See, I'm kind of popping it down in there. Well, we are a little fumbly. That's okay. So get it down in there. And you're going to be kind of like turning it inside out. And kind of get both sides if you can. It's easier to do it that way. And then start doing this part. I know this is a little hard to see, but what you're going to be doing is you're literally turning your bag right side out. But once you get a piece, you're able to kind of gently, it is fumbly, guys, it really is. You're able to start pulling it through, but you still want to be careful that you're not going to be ripping any stitching. Okay, got that corner. And you got to kind of really get it in there. And I see how I'm rolling it a little bit. It's going to kind of help force it through there a little bit more. Jan, if you're watching, I don't know how you would have turned this out if you, like you say, when you use your foam, you like the Pellin foam. I bet that's difficult because it's bad on this. Come on, get in there. You guys, if you know a trick to make this portion easier, please tell me what it is. Because I don't know. Even on other bag making that I've done, it's always been difficult for me to turn them right side out. Or, yeah, right side out? Yeah. So I'm trying to get it in there. I'm trying to get this corner back in there as well. And I'm trying not to tear that fabric. Okay, I think we're getting it. I think we're getting it. Come on. And it's going to be a struggle, but I wanted to have this on film so you guys see exactly how difficult it's going to be to turn that out. Okay, so now when you get that turned out, that is what you're going to kind of get. What I found what was easier for me is I opened my zipper And I've got some pieces of tape in there still from holding down the tabs when we sewed them. So I'm trying to get the zipper open. Let's take that other piece of tape out of there. And the reason why I'm opening the zipper is because it just gives it a little bit more room for you to be able to get your seams, nice. Because you can use your bone folder. I don't like using the rounded point. I use the squared point, and I just kind of run it along the seam to make sure everything is all kind of like pushed out well. Okay. Be careful on this side because that's where that opening is. And it's just going to help that seam kind of lay a little bit better. Okay. So now what you're going to do is we are going to close the bag. What I like to do, I've always liked sewing it, and that's just preference. You can hand sew it closed if you wish. You can press it with your iron so you get your seam nice, but what I found is I just kind of manipulate it enough to where I can get that seam there. And what I do, let's get that folded in there enough, and that other piece, and I bring it over, and you can see right here. And what Jan did in her designs is she used a fabric tape. This is a fusible fabric tape, and it didn't work for me when I tried it. I don't even know how to do it. I'm not sure what to do. In her picture here, you can see that she just took the fabric tape and just ironed it on, and I guess it worked for her. That didn't work for me. Jan, I don't know how you did that. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to skip that part, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to my machine, and I'm going to stitch it closed. So make sure you get that lined up just right, and I'm going to stitch it closed. That's just what works for me. I want to make sure that I still have enough fabric, and you're going to have to kind of like hold it a little bit. You can also whip stitch it closed. You close it to whatever your preference. I think what I may do is I may whip stitch this closed. So I'm going to do that off camera, and I will be right back. Okay, so I just kind of whip stitched my bag closed. Let's stand up here so you guys can see this a little better. Let me bring the light over here. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. It's a little bit difficult to see because I did use a thread that was really close to the same color of the lining. And I just whip stitched it closed. And you can see how it gives it a really nice finished closed look. And I learned that in making stuffed animals, that you have to whip stitch some of the seams closed on them for invisible stitches. So that's just what I like doing in my finishing technique. Jan does say in her instructions, let me move that away. She says, I use the fabric tape to place it in between the lining fabrics, and I iron it. This does an amazing job of sewing it closed, sealing the seam shut, and then she presses and steams the lining to get ready for the boxed corners. Okay, so I'm not going to do it that way. I'm just going to go ahead and box my corners. We're going to put our thread away. I have my little bin. I got this little bin in the fishing lure area at Walmart. So I just kind of put all my bobbins in there when I wind up. Sorry about that yawn, guys. Okay, we're going to stick that away really quickly. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to box our corners. Now, when you box your corners, Jan's got a couple little hints on here. And what she did is she pressed everything before she did her corners, so to get everything laying nice and flat and smooth. And she did a pin here, and you can do it that way, of course, whichever works best for you. What worked best for me, you can see that that is pretty wrinkled. I did take one where I pressed it all nice and smooth, but when I opened my zipper, it kind of worked better for me that way. So what I'm going to do is my seams, I am going to try to put one in one direction and one in the other direction if I can. I can't do it all the time. So what I did when I constructed the little green bag, let me grab that. When I constructed the little green bag, I had a really bad time boxing the corners on here. And I don't know if it was because the bag was just smaller and it was difficult for me. Nothing is wrong with the design. I just had a problem with such a little bag. It will take some practice for me. I don't know, I just had a problem with it. It could have been my Pfaff machine as well. Phyllis the Pfaff started acting up. So as you can see, Phyllis the Pfaff is not here in the usual spot where she sits. Phyllis has been, she's in timeout, and she's over here that way on the shelf. I have wall shelves over there. So she's sitting on timeout on the shelf for a while. And what I have done is I have pulled out my Singer heavy duty machine. I have a Singer heavy duty 4411. And it works really good for sewing over thick seams. So that's what I'm going to do. I am going to box my corners, and the way I was able to get my fabrics, see when you just kind of like stick it together, the way I was able to get my fabrics to line up well enough is I grabbed in the other end and kind of pulled it down a little bit so the fabrics were lined up as best as I could. It will take a little bit of adjusting. So you want it to be as easy, not as easy, but let's see, where's my, I have some tweezers here, and it's sometimes good to kind of like hold the layers, or if you need to adjust it, you can grab the fabric with the tweezer to kind of manipulate it right in the spot that you need it to get it to line up. And I messed it up. There we go. Okay, so that doesn't look too bad. You can see how I have it lined up, and you can see that I have all my layers there, and you can see the stabilizer. My fabric is kind of pulling back again, so I'm going to try to pull that back down enough. Okay, there we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch that right there, and you can see all the seams right here, and you can see where that could be difficult sewing over all those bulky seams. My heavy duty machine did really well. When I was first trying, when I was sewing them on this bag, I literally broke 3 needles trying to get over the seams on my FAF machine. I don't know if my FAF is telling me she just was not happy, or if she is an older machine, so maybe she doesn't like sewing over bulky seams, which, you know, it happens. You'll know what your machine can do. So I'm going to pin here, not pin, but my little clips, and I'm going to put one here. So when you sew your boxed corners, you want to do one at a time. And that way when you're sewing, it's not going to pull the other one out of alignment. So I'm going to sew my boxed corners. She has her, she does say a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and at the end. A helpful hint is that she used her walking foot to box the corners, and because there are a lot of layers in this bag, and the walking foot just made it easier. After you sew all 4 of your corners, you can zigzag over them to give them a nice cleaner look if you wish to do that. She does say in her instructions you don't have to do that. That's completely up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to box the first corner. I will come back and show you what that looks like, and I will be right back. Okay, so I have sewn my box corner, and you can see that I may be a little bit less than a 1/4 inch, but I do know that I caught all of the layers in the seam, which is very important. You can always flip it and look to make sure that they are okay, and it looks really good. I think what I am going to do though is I am going to shorten my stitch length a little bit more, so I know I get a really nice tight stitch there. That way when I pull it, when I have it back out, the stitching isn't pulling apart in any way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish boxing the corners, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have my little lint roller here, and I'm just kind of going over the bag to get any loose threads and off my table, kind of clean up a little bit. I went ahead and I boxed all of my corners. I've got little threads here and there. Now what you do for your finishing is that you would press your bag. And what I did is I also did how she says in her instructions, that you box your corners, and you can see that I also did the, I don't know if you guys can see that very well. I also did a zigzag stitch. I'm not the very best zigzag stitcher, but it just kind of like gave it a little bit more of a finished look, and it just kind of seals it a little bit more. This one could have definitely been better, but you can do maybe a satin stitch all the way down so it seals it and conceals the everything really well. Now you're just going to turn your bag right side out. Oh wow, this turned out so pretty. Okay, so what I did when I did my zigzag stitch is I should have done my stitch a bit tighter. I may go ahead and take a seam ripper and undo those, because you can see them on my outside. I don't use a zigzag stitch very often in the sewing that I do, so I'm not really experienced with them very much. I will have to research a little bit more on how to do the zigzag stitch on my Singer machine, because I will be using it to finish bags. I hope to make up a lot of these bags for gifts and things like that. You can see that I actually got my seams matched up pretty well. I'm really upset with that right there, the zigzag stitch and this one. But I can go ahead and pick those out so those aren't as visible, or I can go over them again with a tighter stitch. Okay, guys, so in closing, I know this is a really long video, and my videos are just that way. I like to show how things are done, and you can kind of see realistically how long they are going to take you to make. I really like the way this one turned out. I like how it kind of looks a little bit vintage with the darker color, and then the like the vintage sheets kind of looking fabric at the top. I really like how it turned out. I like my tabs. You can see where I did my zipper tabs so it would be long enough, and you can see that on both sides. And I got some little threads I need to trim. She does have a few more tips here at the end on finishing, pressing your bag, things like that. Okay, guys, so this is my 5th bag I've made with her pattern, with her designs, and I can honestly tell you that I love this design. When I first started, I don't know if I could have said that, because I was not, I'm not experienced enough in doing a in the hoop design. I do a lot of other embroidery, but when I saw that you could do in the hoop bags, I really fell in love with the idea because it will give it a nice finished look. Being that you know your machine, you know what your machine can do. So with this one, I know that the zigzag stitches need to be adjusted and made tighter. I'm not sure yet how to do that on my machine, but I will figure that out. So all of these bags that I made so far are for myself. I'm going to use them as storage bags either in my bathroom or here in my sewing room. And when I get better at them, I may sell some, or I may give them, I will eventually give some as gifts. In her design, she also states that you can take a, let me show you here, like when I saved some of these pieces of fabric, you can take some bias tape, and you can sew them on and sew them over to close your to conceal your design, or I'm sorry, to seal the boxed corners. So you can just take a piece of pre-made bias tape, or you can cut your own and do bias tape over your boxed corners for a nice finished look if you're going to be selling them. More than likely that will be how I finish them when I get to the point of when I sell them. Okay, guys, leave some comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. Go to the link in the description box below to go directly to her store and use that 30% off code, which is Jennifer30. Again, all capital. Jennifer is all capital and 30 to get a 30% off discount in her Etsy store. Let me know what you guys think. All right, guys, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.